Hi, my name is Mark Samuel. I also have Anthony Escamilla here. Anthony is my expert on tech, and this is a session on how to implement the Breakthrough Leadership Team system virtually, where you are not present with the group that you're actually implementing this with. And just to be aware, this can be done where people are in one location or in multiple locations. Works either way. But we're going to be demonstrating this with the understanding that people are in multiple locations, which is obviously the most complex way to implement this particular system. Now, what you see on the screen right now is the folder that includes all of the different documents that have been prepared and pre-designed and prepared for use to implement this as simply and as quickly as possible. There is a bit of complication to doing this, obviously, because we're used to doing it in person, but you'll find that we have replicated or found a way to replicate that in-person experience in a virtual format. And we've demonstrated this with multiple teams during COVID and found that it worked excellently, even including the follow-up session where we measure results, which is obviously the major indicator for effectiveness and success on this. So we're going to walk through this step by step, and I just want to make sure that you all understand. I'll be giving you kind of where we are in the workbook, but I want to make sure that you understood that the way we do this today is that we give all the participants pre-work, which is the videos that represent all of the concepts from pages 1 to pages 8 in the workbook. And we give it to them prior to attending for two reasons. One is it gets people oriented to the kind of thinking that we have with a B state approach, because it is a different paradigm for many people. But the second reason we give it is because people generally really like it, and it gives a sense of credibility to the program for those who don't know about this particular system and approach. Oftentimes, we get teams that want to ask questions about some of the models that are described on those videos. And as you'll know, it only takes, we set it up in 3 different videos: personal accountability, team accountability, and then B state change implementation. We set it up in 3 videos, but it's around an hour of their time. So it's not huge. They can do it at different times. That's based on their schedule. And again, people have really found it valuable and really like it. Now, during the actual session, I will kind of do a very quick review of some of those models if I want to make an extra point of how it fits for their particular challenges and goals that they're trying to accomplish. So in other words, if I see certain patterns from that organization, or they have particular issues, and there's a model that will describe it, or there's a model that I want to emphasize, like the triangle model, or one of the accountability models, I will spend just a brief amount of time on that as a way to get them back into the mindset, but make it even more applicable and customized for them. And again, that takes them through pages 1 to 8. Then we get right into the creating of the picture of success. And that starts on a page that is page 10, although it's not marked that way, and page 11 that introduces it. And then, of course, I would go over the concepts on page 12, where I just review that A to B concept. I set up what the picture of success is about. I go through the traps, I go through the keys for success, and then I set up the three sections that we'll be working with. And again, sometimes those are customized, and that's fine. I just will customize it in my language of talking about it when I talk about section one, desired reputation with direct reports or customers or stakeholders, section two, optimal teamwork, and then of course section three, benefit and value. Now, when we get to actually working it, um, I will have already had them go through some of the examples. If there is one that's appropriate on pages 13, 14, 15, or 16, or 17, or 18, I'll pick one for them to review just as a way for them to understand what it's going to look like so that they have that picture. But then we get right into implementation and the brainstorm on page 19. And that is the first place that we use one of our virtual forms. So I'm going to have Anthony show you what the form looks like, and then I'm going to walk you through it. So this form has a description of the desired outcome, the setup, and the process steps. But I will not be going through that until later, and we jump right down to the section that looks like it's blank, reputation brainstorm list, because that's what we do in a normal session. And the way we'll do this is we will have them work in their own workbook on page 19 to start with, and say, ask them to create their own individual list on page 19 of a brainstorm of bold breakthrough behaviors for section one, desired reputation, section two, optimal teamwork, section three, benefit and value to the organization, and making sure they don't include existing excellent behaviors, but it's really bold, do differently behaviors. And I will always share a few examples of what bold and do differently looks like for their organization so that I'm planting that seed for them. But we ask them to complete all three sections, and we'll generally give them about 3 to 5 minutes to do that, all on their own. Now, while they're doing that, you could be playing music or you can just have silence. That is up to you. But right now, all we're doing is having them fill that out. Once they've completed that, then we come right back over to this page and we start with the go right, yeah, go right back to where we were. The reputation brainstorm list. No, go back to where we were, Anthony. Don't move it, please. Just go back to the bottom. Okay, now when we're doing this page, they are going to share in the group, just, who's got a hand up, give me one or two. I will write down on this page that whatever they're sharing, so that I can either type exactly what they said or a summary kind of thing of what they said, the essence of what they said, which might be a little bit shorter for this list. But I am basically, as the facilitator, completing all of the bullets. And I'm not touching right where it says write your paragraph. I'm not touching that. I'm only doing the bullets. Then, when that's completed for reputation, I repeat the same process for teamwork, and I repeat the same process for benefit and value, which is section three. And all I'm doing, the way I would do it, instead of using flip charts, I'm just using the form, this Google Doc, to make that happen. Now we'll show you kind of what it looks like. We'll show you what it looks like when it's completed. So that's a brainstorm list. Um, Again, there wouldn't be any of the green highlights on there. So what we're doing is once we have the list made up for each of the three, we then get them into breakout groups. And before we get them in the breakout groups, we choose who's going to be in what group. And then we go over the script and the process that was above. And that's where we're going to go through the desired outcome, the setup, reviewing that, making sure there's a leader who's going to facilitate this and a scribe. So we get all of that set up. Then we go through the process steps. You'll notice in the process steps, the second step is highlight the behaviors that are the biggest, do differently, the boldest. That's what's really key in making sure this works. So we go over that. And then, as you can see, and if they need help, they can ask for it. But as you can see, this is an example of a group that did this. They took the brainstorm list. They then selected in green highlight what the bolding would look like. And then we asked them to formulate a paragraph on the same form that they all contribute to creating. And that sets up each of the three groups in the three breakout rooms to complete their part of this process. Now, when they're done, they need to come and get me to go into their breakout room to test it. That becomes really important because we want to make sure that each of these paragraphs represent an effective stretch. And just as a reminder, the test is very simple. On a scale of 1 to 5, each person in the team, separately and individually, without talking to each other, identifies where are we today relative to the description that they came out with. So a 5 says, oh, the way we function today is exactly the same as the description. And a 1 says, oh my gosh, the way we function today doesn't look like anything in this description. And they're to select a number between 1 and 5, including decimal points, where they can actually choose a number. Each person's going to give you the number. You think of where the average is. And what we're looking for, generally speaking, is 2 or less. So a 3, 4, or 5 does not pass. A 2.5, generally speaking, I don't like to pass and ask them to stretch it a little bit more. If they get around a 2.2 on average, then I'll generally let that go. But what we're really hoping for is something between a 1 and a 2, ideally 1 and 2.2, preferably over any other higher numbers. Now, if someone gives a score of a 1.5 and another member of the team says 3.5, too big of a stretch, I ask them to talk it amongst themselves. I'm going to come back to the room and they need to the 3.5 either needs to convince everybody that their scores are too low, or the 1.5 needs to convince everybody that the scores are too high. But we need to get a much greater alignment. And then based on that alignment of where it settles, it either passes or doesn't pass. When it doesn't pass, I guide them in how to up the ante, if you will, make it a bolder stretch by either adding words that say consistently, or I look through their statement to see where have they fudged a little bit, made it too generic, where they can be a little bit more specific or make it more of a specific stretch. That's generally how we get them to think of it differently. The purpose in having a low score is not just that it's bold, but it also ensures clarity of what they're writing so that people really know this is a stretch. So again, we'll just show you some of the different forms that people have filled out. This is the one on teamwork. So go ahead and show that. And again, you can see they had a brainstorm list. They created their paragraph. It was tested. We then go to the next group on benefit and value. That was brainstormed. All right. So once all three paragraphs have been tested and approved, we now have to get back to the whole group to do our final fine tuning with everybody present so that we have full team alignment. Now, the way we do that is we have a separate page where we will copy and paste each of those paragraphs one page at a time. So the reputation goes here. Then you scroll down and you'll see that there's a space for the teamwork paragraph. Then you scroll down and there's a page for the benefit and value paragraph. And the reason for that is we don't want them seeing the whole thing yet. We want to go paragraph by paragraph, focus on that, get any input, make any changes until we have a final version that the whole group has agreed upon. That will look something like the next page, which is what it looks like filled out. So it has the paragraph one, reputation. Scroll down, it's got paragraph two. We can focus on that, make any changes, and paragraph three. And of course, I will be making the changes based on their feedback and comments. So I still am facilitating this whole piece. Now, once it's done, we want to get this all cleaned up on one page so that I can read it through from top to bottom so that we take out all references to reputation, teamwork, or benefit value. It is one picture of success that I'm reading to the group and having them just listen to it, imagining it's a year from now and this is what their organization sounds and feels like. And I can do that very easily once Anthony has taken those three paragraphs and put them all on this one page that has the whole picture of success completed and completely done. Now, once we're done with that, I always ask them, how does that feel? People really like it. It's usually very descriptive. It really gives people a sense of accomplishment just to have completed this part of the program. Now, the next part is developing team habits. And before we do anything, stay right there, Anthony. What I've been doing recently, and this is a change in the way that I facilitate it from the way I used to do it before. So the way I used to do it before was I would go through the list and pick out what I thought were the biggest do differentlies based on their situation. Like what are the behaviors that I thought, well, that's nice that they're saying it, but I want to understand what that's actually going to look like to do it. But I since stopped doing that. And now the way I do it is I actually ask the group to look at each paragraph and tell me what do they think is the biggest do differently or challenge for them? Like what would move the needle the most in that paragraph if they started doing that? And it's been A, very fast, and B, well, all I do is I highlight that whatever words, whatever sentence, like let's just say as an example, we are known to be dependable, knowledgeable, and consistent. Well, I will then highlight those words and go to the next paragraph and do the same thing. Give me two or three on a long paragraph, two or three, or if it's a short paragraph, give me one if it's there. And I will go through that and then call for a break so that we can set up the next section on team habits. Because really, all we're doing with team habits is taking the essence and the most bold changes of their picture of success and allowing them to create full descriptions of what that would actually look like to doing it, to doing that in their workplace, given their work constraints. So I'm going through the list, getting those, highlighting them, and then taking a break. While we're on break, we set up the next form on team habits. And that is going to look like this. It's got the team habit title in bold, and the next space is blank. And ultimately, that is where their bulleted description of team habits comes into play. Again, a team habit is a process of several behaviors that is like beginning to end or cradle to grave description of what it would be, what they would be doing to demonstrate, in this case, effectively making cross-functional decisions in a timely manner, acting with transparency and follow through with accountability. So whatever they think that was going to look like. But right now, we're just setting it up so they can begin to choose which ones they're individually or in small breakout groups going to write in that paragraph. Now, when we do that, we have all of these set up. We ask them to choose which one they want to write. Of course, we are going through this all in the workbook on pages 26, 27. I've already explained that this is a process of identifying 10 to 15 at the most. Lately, it's been more closer to 10. Team habits, developing a baseline measurement. Step 3, identifying 2 to 4 of the team habits to work on improvement, agreeing on the plans, and then, of course, coming back and evaluating 6 months so they understand where this is going and the basic process. I've already given them examples on page 27 of what a team habit looks like. And lately, we're only asking them to do bullets of a process. They can obviously number it if they want, bullets or numbers, but we are no longer allowing them to do a paragraph as a team habit, unlike the way this was started, 10 years ago or so. So now we're just asking for bulleted, and we go bulleted lists of the process of behaviors, and we go through page 27 to give them an example. We then guide them through how to think about this of writing a team habit on page 28. And then they select the ones they want to write now that this page is already set up. However, be very clear on this. We do not want them touching this page. So this page is what we will use later. For now, they will write their team habit description on page 29. It's a writable section. They can write it right on there. And then we will either have them do it individually, giving them time to do it, or if there's more people than there are team habits, we'll identify who's going to work together. We'll set them up in a breakout room with just them to write the habit. They will have access to viewing the page that Anthony has on the screen now, and all they're doing is using one of their workbooks to write it together. When they're done, and there's no testing of this, it's just whenever they're done writing their bullets, they will let us know by coming back to the whole group and then, or in the whole group, raising their hand to let us know that they're finished. We will have access, uh, or we will ask them to take the bullets and place them one at a time, not one at a time, one person at a time. They will place it in the blank space under the title of their team habit category that they were defining. So each time we'll just take that and we'll do it one at a time. We don't have them do it at once because it messes up the page. Things get really wonky. So we have to be very careful and diligent to take them one at a time, place it in there with the bullets until all of them are done. And when they're all done, it will look something like this next page where they've got all the bullets, they've got the description, and that sets us up for then reviewing it with the group and then giving it a group score based on page 30 that describes the plus, check, and minus. Now, for doing a group score or for doing the scoring, once they've clarified and again fine-tuned it with you leading that facilitation, they either have the choice, if it's a fairly small group, you just do a raise of hands if you can see everybody, or you can do it electronically. How many pluses? And you just have them raise a hand for the number of pluses, raise a hand if it's a check, raise a hand if it's a minus, and then you do the calculation of how many pluses, checks, and minuses to come up with a single score. There are 7 options: minus, minus check, check minus, check, check plus, plus check, and plus. And then we put in the score under the column today so that everybody can see the score and the final result of each one. And this is all on the form ready to go. And you've done it very simply. Then that takes us to the next step, which is on page 32 in the workbooks. And this is where they have a chance to score their choices of what's first choice, second choice, third choice, and fourth choice for what will make the biggest difference in moving the needle within the next 6 months. We don't want them to pick something that's too hard. It's going to take a year or two to see any change. We want them to pick kind of the low-hanging fruit that will also have the biggest change. Now, we've set this up for them by, again, taking out the detailed descriptions and going right back to a page that has all of the titles identified so they can see them all with the scores on the right, and then they can select what they think by number. Again, it's always by number, so it's easy to do. In this case, which of the 13 was their first choice, their second, their third, their fourth, and they fill it out on the next form that's already established, which looks like this. So first choice, they get to choose which number it was. That's their first choice. They get to choose their second choice, and so on. And then once they've done that, they submit it because this all happens automatically. They submit the form, and then what we will see next after everyone has submitted their forms is a page that looks like this. And it's got all of the team habits. And I believe Anthony then cuts and pastes the description of the habit, because otherwise the form itself does not have the description. So we like having the description there, so we cut and paste each one onto this form. But basically, it gives you how many people gave it a first choice, how many gave it a second, how many gave it a third. It's got the points there, and the total is on the left-hand side, so you can easily pick out the ones that had the highest total votes. Now, as we always say, that's just the metric part of this. To make it even better, we ask the group to say, is this all aligned? Does anyone have an exception? Do you want us to talk about one of these others in case, well, wait a second. As an example, habit number 3 had 3 first choice votes, but then only a third choice, and a fourth choice. So it didn't have the highest number. But maybe we need to relook at that, and say, well, shoot, given that the 3 people that all thought it was a first choice, maybe we need to relook at that and bring that back into the fold. So whatever you do to facilitate this process, you end up with the ones that have been then selected for creating mini task force teams to then work on a plan for improvement. So let's go to the next page. And this is exactly the same as what we always use. We have it in a Google Doc. We have it normally in our Word doc. But this is what they're going to use. We identify the people that want to work on this particular habit for improvement. We put them into a breakout room. We give them this form to fill out. And again, they're just writing down the specific aspect of that team habit, because team habits are so big, they can't work on all of it. So they select the part they're going to work on. They identify what outcomes they expect or deliverables within the first 6 months. And we got to contain it to that 6-month period, so we're all clear on expectations of results. And then they should be spending most of their time on the approach, which is basically what are the milestones or the basic strategy for completing this to get those outcomes within 6 months. Then they identify what the very next steps are in actions, and they complete the second part of this form, which is on a separate page. This is all on pages 33 and 34 in their workbooks, where they identify when they're going to meet again, who the team leader of this particular task force is, who the note taker is, and they identify the team members so that everybody has a record of who's working on what. It's optional, but if they have extra time, they can write out any leading indicators of results. And again, if they have time, but it's optional, they can identify anything that might get in their way with the recovery plan. I make those optional because it takes time. And what we definitely want to do is once they've completed this section, we bring them out of the breakout room, and we have each group then present their plan to the whole team for comments, additions, and fine tuning. And that's how this section normally works, whether we're in person or we're virtual. The one thing that I want to mention at this point, and I should have mentioned it earlier, but one advantage to having breakout rooms is that you can actually observe how all the teams are actually working as they're filling out these forms. So you've set it up so that all the titles are there. Each group gets their own form, but it's something that you've already set up. That happens for the picture of success subsessions. It happens for this section. as well, where you can actually see which groups are getting stalled, which groups are making good progress, and you can go in to their breakout room and help them get unstuck if they're stuck. So, meant to mention that earlier, but at least you have that information now. And now we go to the next section, which is once we're done with the team habits, we can get into their business priorities. And again, we have a page already set up. Once you've described the root difference between routine, continuous improvement, and B state priorities, they are now ready on page 40 to identify for themselves what they think are the top 5 to 7 business priorities there are. Each person is doing that. And then once they've all done this individually, you then set up all of the priorities. You do it as a brainstorm, the very same way we did a brainstorm for the picture of success. We do it as a brainstorm here. And we're hoping, honestly, that we get somewhere between 20 and 30 at the most different priorities. That's usually the average. And so once they've got all of their priorities listed, then and explained, then we can have them fill out the form again, very similar to the team habits. Go to the next form, and they can choose which ones they would want that they think are the top 4 out of all of them. And then that gives them, again, another scoring. It's very similar to what we did with team habits. And it shows all the scores and the ones that got the most votes. And that helps to give and identify what are the 3 or 4 primary business priorities and what are the secondary business priorities. We feed this back to the group, look at it, make our final selection. So in this case, there were 11 to start with, but what we end up with, and then if you show the next page, Anthony, it shows how we have taken our normal template after they score, and this would be on page 42 in the workbook, and we identify generally no more than 3 primary priorities and then no more than 4, 5 secondary priorities. And that is all set up for the next step, which is basically identifying who is the project leader. Do they already have a project plan that everybody on the team has seen? They may have one that they've developed but haven't shared it with anybody. And how far, so those 2 columns are there. And then what percentage complete are they with that particular business priority? Are they 10%, 0%, 25%, 35%, so that we can kind of see where are they starting relative to that priority project. That gives everybody a sense of what the business priorities are for the organization. Remembering that they started with probably 20 to 25. Now they're down to generally about 3 to 6 in this day and age. Teams cannot handle much more than that because there's so much other change going on. You need room to deal with that. It leaves less resources and bandwidth for handling your top needle moving priorities. Then that takes us to the next section on creating a project ownership plan. Again, this is in their books on page 44, 45, 46, and 47, 48 in the workbooks, but this is all set up as a template. And it's always best for you to walk them through this, like finding out who the leader is, having them choose one of the projects that would help if they had an ownership plan for, and you are guiding them through this so you get through it as fast as possible. The goal is completing a project ownership plan in 60 to 90 minutes max, because we want to keep this focused, clear. We don't want to put too much time on things that don't need it, which are, one, two, and three. Um, keep going. Four doesn't take very long, but now we get into the meat. Six, what are the challenges? Can they influence it? Are there any assumptions? And then the most important part, keys to successful implementation and execution, which is where you get all of the cross-functional touch points that need to be covered to ensure that this project is successfully implemented before you get results. You know, where does there need to be coordination between different departments? Where does there need to be good communication? Where does there need to be effective training, orientation on whatever new is being developed? All of that gets taken care of here. And then you go to the next page and it turns into the, no, no, just keep scrolling down, turns into the next, I'm sorry, the next page of the project ownership plan, which gets into the milestones. Generally, a milestone per 3 or 4 weeks is what's recommended. And then we just identify the milestones. We set up what we think the order is, but then we identify if we're actually going to do this, how much time do we need, so that we set up the dates, and then we reorder it based on that. So all this is part of the normal facilitation process. And again, we don't worry about leading indicators now or recovery plans. We want to just make sure that they have their marching orders for how they're going to go about completing this project, this major priority, and what it's going to look like over time, so we know how to monitor it and what the expectations are. Then we go to the next sections. There's description, but we go to the next section on meeting effectiveness, because it's our meetings that will be where we solve problems, make decisions relative to these business priorities, relative to improving the habits. And so this is all on pages 50, um, 54, 55 in your workbooks, and then on page 56 to get some of the information of how often do they need to meet, for how much time, to do the problem solving and decision making they need to do, not just status updates. And we turn over to our process agreement, which has a summary of everything we've done so far. So we identify how often are they going to meet, what's the duration, um, and uh, we determine at this time who the team leader or facilitator is going to be, who the note taker is, anything else. And then if you scroll down, we've got us. We can identify the team habits that they chose. We generally don't do much with agreements these days, but this allows you to track the meetings, the habits, and of course, we've got project ownership plans and the summary of priority projects for review as well. And that completes this section. There's obviously, we don't go, there's nothing to do in the actual facilitation, but we can show them in the workbooks, pages 58, which is a template for a team meeting agenda if they want. They don't have to. We show them the team meeting summary. No, not yet, Anthony, go back. We show them the team meeting summary on page 60 with the action items on page 61. We've got the team meeting summary there. So now we're all caught up on page 62. And then if they decide we're going to go for, building team relationships, it is going to be based on, which is our last section, building team relationships. It is based on the team relationship assessment. And if we end up creating team agreements, which we don't typically do any longer, we generally allow the team to use their team habits to see how that impacts their relationships. Now, when you're doing team relationships, normally when we're working with the team, we'll give them and we're doing it in person, we give them the questionnaire at the beginning of the meeting and have them take it. However, since this is virtual, we typically send out the team relationship assessment a few days, not too much earlier, a few days for them to complete that questionnaire remotely or virtually. And that's Anthony is showing what that looks like. I believe it's something like a Survey Monkey type thing, if it's not Survey Monkey. And they get to just select the number that fits in by circle. And again, at the bottom, they probably submit it or publish it. Not sure. I guess it's a publish. So they hit the publish, and then we get the scores on our template. And that's going to look a little bit like, do we have one of those filled out, Anthony? It looks like our normal
We
team
do not.
relationship summary. Do you have one? And there it is. You've seen this before. It basically gives us all the data. It gets automatically inserted. We can see the averages on the right. We can see the ranges of not who, but how many people voted for each one of those topical questions. We get a summary of percentage at the bottom, which is very important because we do expect on the scores of 1 to 3 and a first time team doing it that's of significant size, we would expect anywhere from 25 to 35% of the scores being 1 to 3, 35 to 50% being for a group that has a bit more challenge and problems. And if any team scores over 50% in the 1 to 3s, they have been struggling quite a bit, possibly even losing sleep. This gives us a way to track improvement over time. And then again, the only thing that we're not showing you is the team agreements that are um, in the workbook on pages 60, not on page 69, but it looks like this. And if we need to create an agreement, we can do it virtually, getting what the intention is, getting the conditions for acceptance and clarification, and then we have completed all of the working session part of this program. So again, there's a few more concepts at the end on page 72. Again, you can talk through those. You can get a PowerPoint on those, whatever serves you best. If there's even time to go through it. And again, there's just some basic information at the very end of the program. But for the most part, everyone's going to be pretty tired by this time and they're ready to take action in their meetings. So this completes the description of the virtual offering of breakthrough leadership team system. And again, we will answer any questions on our calls together, but this gives you at least a basic understanding you can come back and refer to. Thank you very much for participating in this. Thank you, Anthony, for setting all of this up. As you can see, there was a lot of pages set up to make this thing work. Anthony had to also, set all of this up to demonstrate it for you. So thank you to everyone, and we'll see you next time.